able, please call me Dan. I work for Ernst& Young. We've been a partner with your Florida retirement system. It seems like forever. It almost has been, I think, since about 2002. And already there's two big reasons why you like us. One, we don't sell anything. As I said, we're a partner with the FRS. We don't sell anything. We don't market anything. And we are totally objective. In the FRS, there's two separate bureaucracies, Division of Retirement, State Board of Administration. We are right in the middle. So any contact you have with Ernst & Young people, totally objective, safe, provided to you by the Florida retirement system. Handout-wise, hopefully all of you have that big handout. And the first part of this has copies of the slides I'm going through. Follow along, make some notes. The second part are appendix pages. I'll refer to a few of those as we go. If you would go ahead and glance at the very last page, that has all the lines on it. That is your action plan or do list. As we go through this, you're going to think of a lot of things to either do or think about or decide on. If you are anything like me, if you don't get it on a list, you won't get it done. Use that as your do list. And as I look around this room, well, let's see, more than half the people, when they die without a will. That means there's a real good chance that probably about half of you have not gotten around to doing your wills, trusts, durable power of attorney, and things like that. And if that's the case for you, I hate to break it to you, but as I look around this room, a lot of you are closer to the end than you are the beginning. Okay? I'm sorry, that's just kind of the way it is, but, okay. So that means some of you won't be able to put off doing that will much longer. So for a bunch of you, the very first thing on your do list should be get a will. Then the little cards, pretty cool. If you didn't get one on the way in, get a couple on the way out. One side reminds you of the website address, myfrs.com, and you can look at a lot of info on the website without a PIN number, but to look at your numbers, pension, investment plan, run the programs, you need your PIN number. And if you'll flip that card over, you see the phone number for the guidance line. And this could be one of the most important things you learn here today. This is your free access to the EY Financial Planners. I'll talk about how that works in a few minutes. I want your questions. I'll stick around afterwards for questions, but I would just soon take most of them as we go through kind of while we're on the subject. You'll have to speak up so I can hear your question, then I'll repeat it back to you. And let's see, I probably don't know all the answers. I'll refer you to the right resource. And when you get ahead of me, not if you get ahead of me, but when you get ahead of me, don't get your feelings hurt when I say I'm headed there in a moment. Will you hang on to that question? Any questions before we get started? All right, well, let's talk about money. Some reasons we're here. We're going to learn the basics of estate planning. We'll talk about some financial risks. There's actually two parts to this presentation today, and the majority of it is estate planning. What's a will? What's a trust? All that kind of stuff. And then there's some insurance at the tail end of it. And it's hard to get all that in. So there's a decent chance that we're going to pass over some of the insurance at the tail end because the estate planning is the important part of that. We'll talk about some ways to manage risk. Hopefully you'll have some things on your do list. All these resources here are yours, whether you chose to be in the FRS pension plan or the investment plan. Though I understand all of you are probably pension folks, and that's fine. But no matter which plan somebody's in, they have all these resources. And the left-hand side, myfrs.com. Everything about the FRS. Pension, investment plan, drop, health insurance subject, subsidy, everything about the FRS. Then the next resource, MyFRS Financial Guidance Line. Again, this could be the most important thing you learn here today. When you dial that phone number listed on the cards and you hit option 1 or 2, you go to the Ernst & Young Financial Planners. And they're there for all your financial questions, FRS and otherwise. FRS, things like, what plan am I in? What will my benefit be? Look me up. What day did I start? When am I eligible for drop? Can I defer it? Should I defer it? Should I go into drop at all? I'm coming out of drop. What are my rollover options? If I take 50 grand out, what are the income taxes? But all that FRS stuff, plus income tax questions, estate planning, debt management. This is like having your own CPA and financial planner for free. And they don't sell anything. They don't market anything. Wonderful, safe, objective, free resource provided to you by your Florida retirement system. And this is probably the only place you'll find good planners aren't trying to sell you something or charge you a fee. So neat resource from the FRS. And if you've already got a planner, we are not trying to get you away from them. Some people that have planners, they call in and talk to ours for maybe just picky FRS questions or second opinion. But a lot of people have adopted a planner on the planner line and they're working through the whole process. So use it as little or as much as you like. And people use it different ways. Some people do just call in maybe once or twice a year, 30-second yes or no questions, and they don't care who they talk to. But a lot of people call in the first time and say, I need it all. I have FRS questions. I need help getting a will done. I need a retirement plan run. I've got income tax questions. And they'll have multiple calls, multiple reports, and a lot of people get to know their planner like their next door neighbor. So use it whatever way you would like. Yes, ma'am. Question is, can you work with one planner? And absolutely you can. And some people don't care. I mean, some people just short questions 4 times a year. They don't care. They just want the quickest person they can lay their hands on. But a lot of people do get to know their planner like their next door neighbor. In fact, about 6 months ago, I ran into a lady that was said something about how much she enjoyed her planner. And when I hear that somebody's having a good experience with a guidance line, I'll typically ask, well, who's the planner you work with? Because I know a lot of them. And she happened to mention a guy that I've met a couple of times. Don't really know, but I've met a couple of times. And she started talking about it, said, oh, isn't it wonderful that they just had that new baby, and they had the problem with the baby before, but they're enjoying their new apartment. And here I've told her I know this person, and, I know his name. I'm not even sure I'd know him if I saw him, but it's just like she's his next door neighbor or something. So, yes, absolutely, you can work with the same person. And a lot of people do that, and they would like for you to do that. Okay, so take advantage of that. I'll talk more as we go through. Yes, sir. Telephone access. Telephone access. And I know a lot of you would rather sit across the table with somebody, but give it a try and see if it works because they're used to dealing with people over the phone. And for some of you, it may not be the perfect scenario, but it works for a whole lot of people. Take advantage of that. The next thing we do, other workshops. When you go to the website, toward the bottom, there's a workshop button. It tells you the subjects we cover, gives you the schedule around the state. And if we're not going to be at your agency or here anytime soon for a particular subject, then you might catch us 5 miles away at a different agency. We do webinars 2 days a quarter, 2 workshops each day. Sign up and view those webinars live. But if none of that works for you, when you look at the list of workshop topics on the website, they have a launch button. Hit that launch button, you can watch a recording of a workshop. If you get home today and your kids or your spouse or somebody says, gosh, I need to get a will done, I wish I'd have gone with you today, then just pull it up on the website and they can watch a recording of this session, not this exact session, but this type of workshop from the last webinar. So take advantage of that. We do electronic surveys, and at some point, either now or later, I would so much appreciate you sending a text to 313131. And the message to send is FRS survey. A second or two after you send it, you'll get a link to an electronic survey to do. It's very short. We would appreciate that. It'll ask the name of the workshop. That's on the front of the handout. It'll ask you my name, but even that's easy. It's a drop down. I'm the only Dan. That's real easy. But we would really appreciate you doing this. And when you send this text, you're not signing up for 100 texts a day on financial stuff. You'll get nothing else from this. They won't even follow up with you one single time. That means if there is such a thing as a safe text to send, this would be the one. But please do that survey. The FRS is sincerely concerned about the job we do, and we really appreciate your help on that survey. Some things on your action plan. Get your PIN number, get a will, do the survey, and you might already know some things that you'd like to talk to one of those guidance line planners out on the phone. Let's take a little test. What do you know about estate planning? Estate planning, true or false? Estate planning is only important for wealthy people. False. Good. Estate planning is only for old folks. False. Good. Joint ownership of property makes having a will unimportant. Good. Okay. And then spouses automatically inherit everything. You bet that's false. Okay, you're all experts. I'll get you out early here. You won't need to take much time. If we're talking about estate planning, I guess I need to define what is your estate, and it's basically everything you own. Here we reference your home or retirement plan, old IRAs, old 401ks, your 457 deferred comp, teachers' 403bs, your life insurance. In a life insurance policy, there's three things you care about. There's the insured, there's the owner, and there's the beneficiary. And most of us are the owner and the insured of our life insurance. And that means that amount of money that will eventually go to our son or our daughter, well, the amount of that benefit is considered part of our taxable estate. So in a few minutes, when I talk about estate taxes, then life insurance, if you have an estate tax problem, life insurance can actually make that problem worse. Some wealthy people that have estate tax problems dump their life insurance. Not cancel it, they just change the ownership. So instead of me owning my life insurance, then I would be the insured, but I might have a trust or maybe my son own the insurance. That means when I die, the government would say, well, did Dan own any life insurance? Well, not a nickel's worth. But the majority of us are not going to have estate tax problems, but just kind of be aware of that. Then basically everything you own is part of your estate. Then what does estate planning do for you? Major thing, distribute property according to your wishes. We'll talk about survivor needs, wishes for medical treatment, handling personal affairs, and we'll talk about estate taxes in a minute. Estate planning starts with a will. With a will, you get to make your wishes legal, and you're doing this to help your heirs through a difficult time. We don't do estate planning for ourselves. We will be dead. We will not care. We do estate planning because we care about the people we leave behind. If you've ever had a close family member die and their stuff was a mess, they didn't have a will, you didn't know where anything was, you knew they had life insurance, but you couldn't find any policies or anything, and you were struggling enough because you've lost someone you've loved, and then you've got to deal with this mess they left behind you. So we're trying to not pass that to the next generation. So we do a little estate planning to make it easy for those people we leave behind. But with a will, you get to document who will receive your property when you die. Name guardians for your kids. Any of you have young kids still, you and your spouse pass away without a will, then a judge decides who's going to raise your kids. Also, decide how the money gets spent. You don't want a judge deciding that. You want to do that. But for those of you that have kids, that have got those little kids, so you got grandkids now, I would bet you money your kids don't have a will. That means if something happens to them, you're going to end up begging a judge to have some input in who's going to raise your grandkids. That means while you're trying to get your affairs in order, drag the kids along with you. Also, try to get the basics done for them to protect those grandkids. And a will also appoints a personal representative. And another term for that's executor. We'll get to that in a few minutes. There's only two big ways when you die that your belongings, your stuff, your estate gets to the next generation or to someone else. It either goes through your will or it transfers automatically. And automatically would be by a property designation, a beneficiary, or joint ownership. And a real big distinction between those two ways, everything that goes through your will goes through probate. Everything that transfers automatically avoids probate. And most of us would like to avoid probate if we can do it on some kind of a reasonable way. And I'm jumping ahead to talk about probate, but I'm coming right back to where we were. But probate, that's the processing of your will by a special court. If you pass away without a will, then the judge will appoint a personal representative or executor for you, might possibly be attorney or CPA being paid by the hour, and the court supervise distribution of assets, paying debts, handling personal affairs. This is the closing out of the estate. I live in Alabama, and they say in Alabama that probate is on average about a 6 month process. I have people that tell me that in Florida it may be on average about a 6 to 9 month process. I used to do a little work in Texas, and in Texas, probate's about 15 minutes and $25. Nobody does anything to avoid probate in Texas because it's such an easy, cheap deal. But if you've got family in New York, you've got a little property, you inherited something in New York, probate's a nightmare up there. It could be a 2 year affair. So a lot of people, situation like that, will have living trust or something like that to avoid probate because it's such a nightmare. And I'm painting kind of a negative picture of probate, that it's going to take a little time, going to cost you a little money. Some people go through the process themselves, but I think probably 99% of the people end up paying lawyers to do the probate thing. Probate is also public information. If you pass away and your stuff goes through the will, goes through probate, then after it's all done, I can go to the courthouse, I can get a list of all your stuff, and I can know all of your business. Now, for some people, that's a bigger deal than others. I'm pretty much like the rest of you. In the grand scheme of things, I really don't have much. I mean, I got a little money, I got a little property, I've got some retirement monies and things like that, and it's all going to my family or the church. So if y'all knew all my business after I died, I'm just not losing a lot of sleep over that. But there are a lot of family situations where we would like to maintain some privacy. But probate is public information. So most of us would like to avoid it if we can on some kind of a reasonable basis. Before I forget to mention, I mentioned a moment ago that you might have property in New York or something like that. One of the problems with probate is if you ended up with your mama left you a little something in New York, you own a little piece of property, you own a home in Florida, maybe you bought a little retirement condo in Tennessee or North Carolina, well, then it looks like you're going to end up going through probate for all three states. So in a few minutes when I talk about a living trust, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people like living trust. You can avoid probate in multiple states. All right, I'm back to where we were. If you own property individually, is the house is just in your name, things like that, they look to the will to see where those go. And that means they'll go through probate. You can own property jointly with a spouse. I own my home jointly with my wife. Joint tenancy will right of survivorship. That means I've got a contract with my wife that if I passed away today, she immediately automatically gets my half the house. She dies, I immediately automatically get her half the house. That's one of those automatic transfers. That means it avoids probate. You can also own property jointly with a non-spouse and have it avoid probate. Then you might see this sometimes in partner type issues. You might also see it with family issues. My wife has 3 sisters, and if their dad gave the old family farm to the 4 girls, he would title it jointly between the 4 girls. Because when my wife dies, he wants me having nothing to do with that. He wants it to remain between the remaining girls there. So that would be an automatic transfer. It avoids probate. But I could own property with someone and have it go through my will. And that's called tenancy in common. If I was buying a house to remodel with my buddy Steve, I'd put it half in my name, half in his name. But when I die, I don't want Steve and his wife getting my half the house. Of course, I want it to go to my wife. We'd title that tenancy in common. That means when I die, they look at my will. My will says give everything to my wife, so that would go through probate. Let's talk about retirement plans, your drop accounts, your 457 deferred comp, your FRS investment plan, 403Bs, IRAs, all those kinds of things have beneficiary designations on them. And some people have their estate or my estate or the estate of as a beneficiary. If you've done that, what you are saying is, I have a will. look to my will to see where that stuff goes. And if you got a will, that doesn't sound bad, right? But wait a minute, that means it'll have to go through probate. So maybe 6 months or so before anybody gets that money. Another reason typically not to have your estate as a beneficiary is you foul up the tax advantages. Then all my stuff has my wife as my beneficiary. And if I died today, then my IRA, she could either turn those into her IRA and maintain the tax deferral, or she could actually leave it in my name with her being the owner, but maintain the tax deferral. But if I leave those things to my estate and she gets them through my will, all the taxes are going to have to be paid quickly. So usually we have all those kinds of retirement accounts going direct to named beneficiaries. And I would always have a secondary or a contingent beneficiary name. And you can split things up. You could have half go to one kid, half to another. I would always use percentages. If you give 10,000 to one kid, 10,000 to another, sure as heck there's going to be 19,000 or 21,000 in there. You've just kind of slowed up the process. So I typically would always use percentages. Be careful on things like bank accounts, that there's a good chance that a lot of you have a son or a daughter or a brother or sister's name on your bank accounts. And usually there's two reasons why people do that. One might be, well, if I died, I'd like for them to immediately get the money. Well, instead of doing that way, you would typically have a beneficiary designation on your bank account. A lot of banks or financial institutions call them transfer on death. And then the other reason people have other people's names on accounts typically is, well, if I'm in a car wreck today, Alzheimer's, dementia, a coma, something like that, somebody can write checks. But the better way to do that's what's called a durable power of attorney. I'll talk about in a few minutes. But the big danger about having other people's names on those accounts is you're just giving them that money. And have you heard of lawsuits, divorces, things like that? I mean, there's a decent chance the money in your checking account just went to that evil ex-son-in-law you hated since the day you met him. So I wouldn't have other people's names on those kinds of accounts. In my family, there was Uncle Jess, and Uncle Jess didn't get married for a long time. And he always had his brother Tom's name on everything he owned. Jesse finally got married, and he added his wife to everything he had immediately, but he left Tom's name on there also. 15 years later, Jesse had a head injury, and they weren't sure he was going to make it. And Tom went down and sucked all the money out of every account, checking accounts, savings accounts, brokerage accounts. I mean, he took every nickel. And the wife didn't find out about it till the first rubber check started showing up, and she's screaming at the bank, knowing they got a lot of money. She got a husband on life support almost, and stressed out, screaming at the bank. Only to find out Tom took the money, and the family got on him, and he gave it back. But when he finally said why was it, well, he's only been married to her for 15 years. Sure, he didn't want her to have any of that money, but be careful. I don't know if you've ever heard that saying about sometimes you don't know your family until you share an estate with them. But be careful about having your name or other people's names on your accounts. Now, be careful, too, about your name on other people's. You may have your name on your mama's accounts. But if you get sued, you're in a traffic accident, something like that, your mama's money might be at risk. If you have your mama's name on your checking account, you might have just fouled your mom up for maybe those nursing care, Medicaid type benefits down the road. So be careful of that. Be careful about having your name on automobiles, things like that. My mama died last year. She had Alzheimer's for about 8 years. But while she was still in good mind, I bought her a car one year. And as doing the paperwork, then I signed the paperwork just for the car to be in her name. And they took the paperwork in the back, did whatever they do in the back, and they brought it back out. They had added my name to the titling of the car. And I tore up the paper, said, no, we got to start over. It's not going to be in my name, just Mama's name. And the guy said, oh, you want your name on it too. You can do the tags, and when your mama dies, you immediately get the car. And I said, have you seen the car we're trading in? And the guy looked at me like I was stupid and said, well, I drove it. And I said, well, did you happen to notice all the dents in that car? I said, my mama runs into things, and I'm not going to be associated with the liability of my mama running over somebody. And we all laugh about that. That's funny. But another family deal, I've got an aunt. I had an aunt in Arkansas. My aunt was driving one day, had her sister in the car. My aunt caused a wreck that killed her and two other people in another car. And later, I talking with her son, my cousin Mac, and I said, "Hey, everything turned out good or okay?" He said, "Well, I guess it turned out okay. They took every nickel Mama had. You know, they took insurance, they took house, they took retirement plans, they took every nickel there was." He said, "I'm just glad my name wasn't on that car." So don't have your name on Mama's cars, things like that. It's just too dangerous. Also, if you got those 35-year-old kids got a little credit issue, then the credit issue ain't the only issue, folks. Okay, so you don't need your name on those kids' cars that have got issues. I know you love them, but they got issues, okay? And you got to protect yourself at some point. So I'd get my name off those kids' cars. And if you got the 16-year-old, you don't really have any choice. But if you got a 16-year-old, your name's on the car, you better jack up that umbrella liability another million or something like that. But be real careful. Also, if your parents are still around and you're starting to do those asset transfers, get stuff out of mama's name, trying to make her look broke so the government will pay for nursing home care, be very careful before you start transferring assets. I wouldn't do it without getting some tax advice because you could transfer something that seems to make sense, but then you cause yourself an income tax nightmare down the road. So be real careful before you start doing that kind of stuff. It's just too dangerous tax wise. Life insurance, pretty similar to the retirement accounts. Some people leave their insurance to their estate. That means look to the will, has to go through probate. Most life insurance goes direct to named beneficiaries. I would always have that secondary beneficiary. My stuff goes to my wife, but she and I pass at the same time. We've already got those contingent beneficiaries named. Sometimes you might say, well, they don't let me do a contingent beneficiary. Well, chances are you just got to ask for another form maybe. And when you go to a bank or some financial institution, if you ask for a beneficiary form and they say, we don't do that, then there's a good chance they just call it something else, maybe transfer on death or something. Okay, I don't know what the form is titled, but when I die, where's the money go? I want that form, whatever that form is. But life insurance, be careful who the beneficiary is. Understand little kids can't own money. So if you leave a bunch of life insurance money to your 6-year-old grandson, well, you've thrown it into the court system. And the judge is going to set up a trust and going to decide how the money gets spent. And the judge will also decide who will be the trustee for that money. If you are leaving assets directly to a grandson or a granddaughter that's very young, there's a decent chance you're doing that for a specific reason. I mean, what might be logical is leave the money to your kids and say, spend it on the grandkids. But if you're if you're skipping that, typically there's a reason. Well, the judge, if you skip that, the judge probably is going to name your kids as trustees for the trust. So you probably haven't solved your problem there, okay? So if you're leaving stuff to little kids, then you're probably going to have to use a trust. And we're headed there right now. But be sure on your life insurance. Oh, as we're talking about beneficiaries, make sure you've got all your beneficiaries up to date. At least about 10 times a year, I run into someone that maybe is just, well, back just a few months ago, a guy that I've known in Tampa for a while. I know his brother died last year, and and as I was talking about this, I saw Mike over there shaking his head, and it turns out that when Mike's brother died, then he had a wife and a couple of little girls. They're not getting any life insurance money because Mike's brother forgot to change his beneficiary after he got divorced. So the life insurance money going to some evil ex that nobody's seen for 10 or 15 years. So if you've gone through changes, particularly divorces, make sure you've changed everything. it's so easy, if you're in the middle of that divorce, I mean, you're so stressed anyway that sometimes it's real easy to miss some of the business issues, but make sure you change the beneficiaries. A bunch of you have kids that have gone through a divorce. Sit them down one day and just walk through everything. Have you changed your life insurance? The stuff you have at work, your individual, but I promise you, somebody in here has forgotten to change a beneficiary. I run into it all the time. Let's talk about trust. I don't have a separate slide for trust, but there are two major types of trust. Irrevocable trust, revocable trust. Irrevocable trust means when I set it up and I put something in it, I have given it away. I do not own it anymore. And people usually use irrevocable trust to reduce estate taxes. If I own some assets, either some property, maybe some stocks or something like that, that I knew were going to grow rapidly, and when I die, that stuff's going to be worth so much that I'm going to pay a bunch of estate taxes. Well, my thought might be, if all the stuff is going to my kids anyway, then maybe I should just give it to them now, and then all that growth will be their estate tax problem 75 years down the road or something. The only problem with that is if I give it to the kids today, they'll blow it in about 30 minutes. So instead of me giving it direct to the kids, I set up this irrevocable trust, and the kids are the ultimate beneficiary. But they have no control over it until I actually die. And when I give it to that irrevocable trust, I don't own it anymore. So when I die, the IRS says, well, does Dan own any stuff? And no. Dan's trust owns some stuff, but it's not estate taxable. So people typically use these irrevocable trusts to reduce estate taxes. Revocable trust. These are real hot in the news media now. You typically hear these called revocable living trust. And two big reasons for these. One, we talked about how most people would like to avoid probate if at all possible. And you can avoid it easily on a lot of things by having all your stuff go to beneficiaries. But then there may be some stuff that's just going to end up going through your will. Maybe your house, a piece of property, things like that. Well, instead of me owning those things, I might put those in my revocable living trust with the kids as the ultimate beneficiary, which means when I pass away, everything in that trust goes directly to the kids, avoiding probate. So a revocable living trust lets you avoid probate. Now, it doesn't avoid estate taxes because everything in that trust I still own. Some people might say, well, I'm not ready to give my house away. If you put the house in the name of your revocable living trust, you've not given it away. It's your trust. So when you die, then the value of everything in that trust is considered part of your taxable estate. And if you decide to sell that house, you just sell it out of the trust. It's your trust. I knew, and you can throw it in there if you want to. So you still own and control everything in that revocable living trust. So it doesn't save you on estate taxes, it just avoids probate. And earlier when I mentioned property in different states, that a lot of people have these trusts set up to own a piece of land, maybe in New York, a condo in North Carolina, and maybe their residence in Florida. So they avoid probate in all three states. Another reason why people use these revocable living trusts would be asset management in the case of an incapacity. And I read a good example of this one the other day. A husband and wife had been very successful, been married a long time, and very successful financially. The husband had passed away. The wife was getting fairly old, and she was very concerned about Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. But a lot of her concern was how would her kids manage her assets while she was incapacitated. And she ended up setting up one of these revocable living trusts. She puts just about everything in it. The kids are the ultimate beneficiary. But while she is in good shape, she, along with some trusted advisors, that she has chosen are managing the assets. And then when she gets dementia or Alzheimer's, those trusted advisors will continue to be trustees and manage the assets. And if the kids come in and say, hey, we want to start selling stuff, we want to do some things, then the trustees say, no, here's the set of documents. We're managing these assets according to your mom's wishes. You have no power. Okay. Now you'll get everything when your mama dies, but while your mama's alive, then she has set up this trust and we're managing the assets for her. So a lot of people use it for asset management in the case of Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. I have just given you the impression that you go to the lawyer's office and there's two piles of paper there. You just say, I want that trust or that trust. But it's more complicated than that. Trusts are kind of living, breathing animals. And it could be you go to the lawyer and say, this is my problem. And then they design a trust that might start off as a revocable trust, and then it might turn into an irrevocable trust down the road somewhere. Do you need a will and a trust? And typically you do. Even if you've got an expensive trust with every detail imaginable, then you'll typically have a real cheap will because there's a decent chance you've forgotten something. And the will might be almost as simple as saying, I meant to have everything in the trust, but if I miss something, this is what you do with it. And you can even have a will, I think they call a pour-over will, that says, I meant to have everything in the trust. If I miss something, throw it in the trust. Okay, so even if you have a real complicated, expensive trust, you're going to have a little cheap nickel and dime will just for whatever you have missed. All right, I'm headed over to guardians for the kids, and two types of guardians. Day-to-day child care. Who's going to raise the kids and tuck them in at night, raise them with the same moral values, feed and clothe them, things like that. Then somebody might have their brother, their sister. I would always have two sets of guardians named. Have the primary, the ones that right now make the most sense and they've agreed to do it and all that, but then have that second choice because 5 years down the road, your first choice their life may be in a mess right then. They just may not be able to do it. So I would always have contingent guardians. And then who handles the money, or how does the money get handled? The most dangerous way, I run into people fairly often that say, well, Dan, we're just leaving all the money to the guardians for the kids. They know us, they'll spend it on the kids, we trust them and all that. Well, even if they have good intentions, there are lawsuits, divorces, things like that, so that's not a good way to do it. Some people just leave the money to little kids, but that gets thrown into the court system. Somebody else makes the decisions on how the money gets spent. The best way to handle money for little kids is to set up a trust. And a trust is your opportunity to manage the money from the grave. And you need to go into a lot of detail about the trust. And I've got some friends that a while back asked me to be the trustee for their kids for their kids' money should something happen to them. And I said, sure. And I talked about how much detail we needed in the trust. And then when I finally got a copy of the documents, they basically said, Dan, you know us, you know the kids, use your best judgment. And I called back complaining and said, hey, I told you I needed a lot of detail in the trust about college and cars and everything like that. And they said, well, we got to redo the trust. And I said, no, but send me a nice letter that details all the stuff we're talking about. I got a letter with about 4 line items on it. But finally, they visited for the weekend one time, and we sat down and talked about all 3 kids. And their kids are dramatically different. They've got one kid that could be Mr. Perfect. I mean, this kid's never made a bad decision in his life. You could probably give him money. He'll probably cure cancer and cure world hunger. I mean, he's just never made, he's just that perfect kid. But they got another kid, Jake, and Jake's not a good kid. Okay, all right. I love Jake. Okay, I love Jake, but Jake's never made a good decision in his life. Okay, Jake's decisions are all bad. And, we're praying that it's going to get better down the road. But, Jake right now doesn't make good decisions. And if I ever have to be the trustee for Jake's money, this is going to be a nightmare. I mean, really. But I've got all these. I've got this letter now. I've got about 8 pages. So we got about 8 pages for all the kids. I think 7.5 of those pages are for Jake. Okay. But I'm going to be able to say, no, Jake, you're not getting money for that. Your mom and I talked about it. Look, that's her writing right there. So go into a lot of detail in these trusts. Maybe I want my kid to go to a private high school, send them to a state university, room and board, give them maybe 25% of the money when they graduate college, give them some more at 25, some more at 30, pay for a wedding in there. But go into detail how you want the money spent. And then also choosing a trustee. And that's the person that makes sure the money gets invested wisely and doled out according to your wishes. Who's the trustee? Some people have the guardian for the kids as trustee for the money. But that might be too close to the situation. Some people might have their brother as guardian for the kids, may have sister and granddaddy as trustee for the money. But if you got granddaddy as trustee for the money, little Johnny wants money, then maybe granddaddy's going to be too flexible or whatever. A lot of people use bank trust departments. I've got a cousin, got a trust of his grandfather. Am South Bank's a trustee. And when he needs money, they sit in front of a trust officer, say, I need money. Trust officer says, what for? And if Paul says this quarter's college, then they just read the trust, line 6, college tuition, give me the bill, I'll pay it. But if he says, I desperately need 2 new red Corvettes, then he's not getting the money. He can lay in the floor screaming till closing time. He's not getting the money. So a lot of people like the idea of using bank trust departments. Of course, banks charge for this kind of stuff, but if they do executor services, trustees, all that kind of stuff, just call your bank, ask for the trust department, say, what do y'all charge for this kind of stuff? It may be that that's your best option there. And you don't just use these trusts for little kids. In my neighborhood, you can use them for adult children also. It's kind of funny. There's a deal going on in my neighborhood now. There's 2 separate families, and they're not related at all. But the women in these 2 families are mid-60s, I think, something like that, and their final parents just passed away. Not related, 2 totally separate deals, but there must have been money in both those families because both those women have been talking about how much money they're about to get, only to find out both their mamas ended up, instead of giving them a chunk of money, they're getting monthly checks. And both these women are mad at their mamas. Why'd mama treat me this way? And I'm keeping my mouth shut, but I know exactly why their mamas did this. I mean, one of these women is on her probably the 5th husband, and this one's not staying either, okay? So mama trying to protect that a little bit, and the other one never found a $20 bill she couldn't spend multiple times. So if mama gave her that money would be gone in 6 months. So there's nothing wrong with doing a trust for your grown kids also. Personal representative, another term for this, executor. This is a person that carries out the wishes in the will, files the court papers, gets copies of the death certificate, takes everything through probate, pays the debts and taxes, does the final tax return, does the estate tax return, gets the kids to the guardian, sets up the trust, does the yard sale, does the estate sale, sells the house, but just does everything. And my wife is my executor. I am her executor. We've got my best friend is our contingent executor. And who does it need to be? Somebody you trust, somewhat organized and dependable, some kind of financial aptitude. They don't have to be attorneys or CPAs. They can hire whoever they want, but you know who in your family's got good judgment about things. And you can have multiple executors. If you have 2 kids, you could appoint one of them as the executor, and you'd probably make the other one mad. Or if you want to, you can just make them co-executors. And if they fight later on down the road, then you don't care. You're dead. That's okay like that. Be careful about who you're using as an executor. Don't hold me to this, but I think in Florida, I believe you can use anyone as an executor as long as they're a resident of Florida. But if you want to use somebody outside the state, I think they have to be an immediate family member. But don't hold me to that. Just when you're talking to the lawyer, make sure they know where they live. Some people do it just out of locality or geography. If you got 3 kids and 2 of them live 300 miles away, one of them lives across the street, some people would just appoint the one across the street. Is that a question, sir? Can a parent or can someone appoint you an executor without you knowing about it? Absolutely, they can. Because when we talk about wills in a minute, I mean, you don't have to share your wills with anyone else. But also, just because you get appointed to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. I mean, you can refuse to do that. And I don't know what that process is or paperwork, but just because somebody's appointed you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. And remember that term executor. That executor executes the will. And I run into some family situations where some people think the title executor means I get to choose where everything goes, whether it's according to the will or not. But the idea of the executor is executes the will, not a person that, well, I don't want that to go to Susie, I want it to go to little Johnny. But people do it different ways. I've got a buddy that when his dad died, his daddy didn't make any decisions at all. His dad appointed my friend the executor, his son the executor, and said in the will that Scott is going to dole everything out. And his dad had a second wife and a lot of other complications, and it so much would have been easier if Daddy would have made his own decisions rather than just throwing this to my friend Scott and put him in the middle of a bunch of stuff. Okay. But be sure you're talking to the attorney about who your executor is. After your will's prepared, keep it in a safe place. Some people have multiple originals of a will. But the problem with that is if you have, say, 4 kids, you have an original for all 4 kids. To use a will, you have to find all 4 originals. Most people have one original, and they know where that one is. You might keep it in a safe deposit box, fireproof file cabinet, something like that. Maybe keep it in your brother-in-law fire cabinet or something like that. But make sure that you know where that original is. And be careful about having them in a safe deposit box. My wife and I have a safe deposit box at a big bank. My name's on it. My wife's name's on it. We go in and out of that thing independently. But if the bank finds out I've died, they're going to shut that box down. They're not going to let my wife in there until she comes up with court administration papers. And my wife might get in there before the bank finds out I've died, but they have people that check obituaries every night. So it could be that safe deposit box is not the place to have some of the things that you have in there. But somebody's got to get their hands on that will quickly, because as soon as you are being pronounced dead, there's already people at your house taking stuff. Mama promised me this, Daddy promised me that. So somebody's got to get their hands on that will quickly. And some of you might share things. I mean, if you got 3 kids, you're splitting everything up evenly. You might just give everybody a copy and say, hey, no secrets here. But you don't have to treat them the same. I've got a good friend that's got a little money, and he's got a son and a daughter. And he's really had a hard time deciding, should he treat them equally? His daughter's an orthopedic surgeon, and best I can tell, she's making a couple of million a year. Got a son that is a great man, but he just doesn't have that gift for making money. And my friend's had a hard time deciding, does he treat him the same? And he's finally decided to give more stuff to his son. But now what he can't decide is, should he share this with them? And there's some strong personalities in that family. If he shares that ahead of time, they're going to make his life miserable. So he shouldn't tell them about that. But it's going to be interesting to watch how that one unfolds. But you don't have to share this stuff with them. And you can have a will filed. You can file it at the courthouse, but wills don't have to be filed. but just make sure somebody can get their hands on that will. At the very bottom of the slide, it mentions document locator, and we've given you a little one in those appendix pages in the back, but write this down for me. Write Vital Records Organizer. Vital Records Organizer. I am fairly organized. My wife and I are, and we have pretty much our whole financial life in two file drawers, and I feel pretty good about being that organized. But a while back, my wife said something about, well, if you passed away, is the best thing for me to do just to start at the front of the file drawers to start working my way through? Well, I didn't feel very good about that. And my wife's no dummy. I mean, she handles our money. She does everything. I'm kind of the typical guy. The other day, I had to write a check. I had to ask my wife for a check. Okay, so, I mean, I'm just telling you, my wife knows what's going on, but she didn't feel comfortable with what was going to happen when I died. But we came up with one of these vital records organizers, and ours is maybe 10 pages long, but it starts out, it's got all the information on us, date of birth, social security, everything, everything about the kids. It's got everything still in there about my mom that was in our care, though she's passed away now. It's got a list of everybody that needs to be notified with their phone number should we pass away. Got a list of all our professionals, who does our taxes, who did our wills and trusts, things like that. It's got a list of our church information. It's got a list of all our bank accounts, all of our brokerage accounts, retirement, everything. The info on who my wife would call at Ernst & Young about my company benefits, list of all our credit cards, property, life insurance policies, policy number, toll-free 800 number. It's got everything in about these 8 pages. That means that as long as my wife, if something happened to me today, my wife pulls out that Vital Records Organizer. It's everything she needs to do or know to be able to function. She could hand a page to one of her sisters and say, hey, call those people. They need to know died. And another page that's got the life insurance policies, and say, call the insurance company, find out what we need to do to start the process. So my wife has those few pages. That's everything she needs to do. The backup's in the file folders, but she's got everything right there. And I feel so good about having that. And I do not have a good one to give you. There's one in the appendix pages, and I'll just tell you, it's not great. But if you'll Google Vital Records Organizer, you'll find a bunch of that are free that you can download. But I would do those, even if you don't have wills. But just to have those pieces of paper that has everything on it, then that'd just be a wonderful deal. So take a look at that Vital Records Organizer, or think about doing one of those. Then reviewing your will, set a date for review. My wife and I look at our wills and trusts, things like that, in December. I've got a little downtime from work, and we're thinking about family stuff anyway, so we read through everything. I'm not saying take them to the attorneys to get them reviewed, but just you and spouse or whoever look through your stuff. And also do it, and December's a logical time for us to do it. And then, of course, if there's marriages, divorces, changes, and stuff like that, a couple of years ago, we were going through our stuff in December, and we realized that the contingent executor we had that was an in-law had turned out to be an outlaw. So we needed to make a change with that. And I knew Mike was off the rails, but I had just kind of forgotten that he was our contingent executor. So we ended up having to change that. Everything. Okay. She's got a friend that keeps everything, that pulls stuff out of the safe deposit box, and they keep it in the freezer at the house. Because if there's a flood or something, the freezer's supposed to be safe. Okay. You know, everybody's got a different way they do things. I'm not sure I would do that one. Okay. But we've got stuff. I mean, we've got one fireproof file cabinet, but And I think it's guaranteed, which means if it burns up in a fire, I think they'll send us another one or something. But our important stuff we've got in a safe deposit box at the bank. I've got a buddy that, well, my contingent executor, he's got one of these big gun safes in his basement that is guaranteed to survive a nuclear blast or something like that. That's where he keeps everything. In fact, I'll tell you in a minute, he keeps even some of our documents there. But everything I've talked about so far is about having a lawyer do your will. And most people have lawyers do their wills, but you can do your own. But be real careful about that. Understand if you just sit down and write something out, sign it, and have it witnessed, the chances of it being legal and usable are slim to none. There's specific wording and state specific. So you can get forms on the internet. You see those ads on TV every 5 minutes for legal Zoom. So you can do your own, but just be careful about that. I've got a friend that his mom recently died, and he found out she had done her own will about 10 years ago and used two witnesses he never knew, moved out of state, and it was witnessed incorrectly. So he had to find these two witnesses he never knew and have them sign court affidavits. He found one in Mississippi, one in Tennessee. They signed the court affidavits. He was able to use the will. But just be real careful if you're going to do your own wills. And part of it is a complication deal. If you've got a real simple situation, then you can probably do a fill-in-the-blank will, and it'd probably be okay. But if you got some complications in your life, then chances are you're going to need a lawyer for that. And understand, I don't want to pay lawyers for anything, but sometimes they're just kind of a necessary evil. Come on, y'all know that's funny. Okay, you know that's funny. Okay, no, but I mean, it's like a plumber or anything else. I mean, when my mama went south mentally, we needed a little trust to make sure my mama was taken care of. And there were a couple of weird issues, and I had to go to my friend Perry, that's a lawyer, and say, Perry, I got this problem. How do I solve this? And he said, well, I just need to write up a trust that'll address this, this, and this. So I went to Perry, the lawyer, with a problem. He gives me pieces of paper, and I had to pay for them, but I don't really think about paying for the paper. I paid for Perry's knowledge. And, you know, sometimes we just have to pay lawyers, plumbers, whatever it is, or something like that. But now the guidance line, I mentioned that you can ask them questions like this. They will not do your documents for you, okay? But they're out there to help you. You can call them, I need a will or a trust, and I got this strange family situation going on, so they can help you decide, make a lot of decisions. So when you get to the attorney, you're 99% the way there. Durable power of attorney. These are other documents that go along, and the durable power will be a separate document from your will, but it's hard to get one without the other. They kind of come as a pair almost. Durable power of attorney grants somebody the power to make financial decisions if you're incapacitated. If I was in a coma, car wreck, Alzheimer's, things like that, then I could make financial decisions. I had my mom's durable power of attorney, so when she had Alzheimer's and I wrote checks on her account, eventually sold her home, and things like that. Be careful. Make sure, we all need a durable power of attorney right now because we could be in a traffic accident today, but more likely you need to make sure your parents have them because of the Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. I almost fouled this up with my mama that I've known forever that I had my mama's will and durable power of attorney in our safe deposit box. My dad's been gone forever, but I even still had his in there, and I know it's there. And every once in a while, I would be going through stuff, and I would just notice mama's will. But then when mama started headed south, I pulled them out. The durable power wasn't there. And I know it was there, but all of a sudden, I just couldn't find it. And I'm glad I was able to take Mama to the lawyer on a good day, if you know what I mean, so I could get that durable power done. Mistake I made was I had me on the durable power, but I travel all the time. My wife did most of the care given and business and all that stuff for my mama. So every time something had to be done, then, I had to make plans to be there, something like that. So I fouled up not having my wife on the thing. So think about who's going to be the actual person around like that. Then a living will states your wishes for medical treatment that you do or do not want provided. This is where you say, I don't want to be kept alive on life support, feeding tubes, things like that. Then the healthcare surrogate designation, that's a healthcare power of attorney. That grants somebody the power to make medical decisions on your behalf. And do you need a living will and a healthcare surrogate? Probably, because you're not going to be able to go into incredible detail or enough detail on the living will. And who does these jobs? Mine's real simple. My wife is the executor. My wife has my durable power. My wife is my healthcare surrogate, which means if I'm in a coma today, then my wife will make financial decisions. She has my durable power. She'll negotiate with the hospital for care for me. She has my health care power of attorney. But then when I die, those two powers will lapse. But my wife will keep doing everything. Her job description just changes. At that point, she'll be the executor of my estate. So for me, it's real easy. Not too long ago, a lady almost in tears said, I got a problem. My son will be my executor. He'll have my durable power of attorney. He refuses to be my health care surrogate. What do I do? And I said, appoint somebody else. And she said, doesn't the same person have to do it? No, you can have somebody else. But I did ask, well, why won't he do that? Oh, we're just so close. He doesn't want to have anything to do with medical decisions for me. I'm not comfortable with that. So just appoint somebody else. You can have multiple people too. A lady not too long ago said, I've got my two daughters as my health care surrogate. I didn't like the idea. I didn't like the sound of that. Two sounds like a tie. I kind of kiddingly, I'm not sure I'm kidding though. I think you need to have the meanest rascal in the family as your health care surrogate because that's somebody that's going to have to make a tough decision. Well, that's daddy. I love him more than anything, but we got to let him go or he wouldn't want this. So make sure that they're going to do their best to follow your wishes. Yes, ma'am. The question is, well, would it be good to have multiple people? Maybe have a spouse and then maybe son also. Well, if everybody's going to agree, probably. But I think at some point you just got to decide who's going to be the best person here. And particularly if you got blended families, then can you imagine if you had current spouse on your healthcare surrogate with your son from your first marriage? I mean, can you just kind of picture the problems that that kind of thing might give up? But you just got to, you do whatever you want with it. You just got to make sure who might follow these wishes. All right. Yeah, but you just got to decide what's going to be the best situation for you. But hopefully you'll just close your eyes at night and not wake up in the morning, and most of this won't matter. Yes. Absolutely. The question is, or statement is, and maybe I did misunderstand, that you can have a contingent choice, that this is my first choice, but if that person's not available or won't serve, then the second deal, kind of like guardians for the kids. I mean, I might have the perfect person as guardian for the kids, but 5 years down the road, when this actually has to happen, that person may not be in a good position to be able to do that, so you got that second choice already named. Okay. And let's see, the durable power of attorney generally comes along with the will. Hard to get one done without the other. And the living will and the healthcare surrogate, tons and tons of people that don't even have wills, then they'll just print those off the internet, or a lot of people around the state. What's that hospital chain that does it? 3 wishes or 5 wishes? Yeah. But a lot of people use that, so you can do those. If you go to the doctor today for a hangnail, they'll probably ask you, do you have a living will? And if you say no, they'll probably give you a form there. Let's talk about estate taxes. And we all understand income taxes, but then there's this other tax called the estate tax or death tax, inheritance tax, transfer tax. And that's a tax that when you pass away, they add up the value of everything you've owned. And if you own too much, they want to tax it one last time. And the tax rates are atrocious. They start at about 47%. But there's a couple of pieces of good news. One is between a husband and wife, there's no estate tax. That means if I died today, no matter what I'm worth, I can leave it to my wife, no estate tax. If she dies today, she leaves it all to me, no estate tax. But when the second one of us dies and we leave it to kids or someone else, that's when this potential estate tax kicks in. But the second piece of good news is there's a free amount we can give away estate tax free. And that limit has gone up dramatically. It wasn't just too many years ago. That free limit was only about $600,000, which means you get your house paid for, you get a little retirement money, you got a couple other bucks, you got life insurance money. A lot of people had a little estate tax problem because it was 600,000. Now you see here on the far right that I can give away over $11 million estate tax free. My wife can give away $11 million. So between the two of us, we could give away over $22 million before we would start paying estate taxes. That means the only problem I've got now is I don't have an estate tax problem. I finally find a tax I'd like to pay a little bit of, and I don't even qualify. So most of us do not have an estate tax problem. But what's included in your estate? We talked about this earlier. Pretty much everything. All your retirement accounts, life insurance you own, assets you own, half of everything jointly, revocable trust. We add it all up. That's a gross estate. Then subtract your mortgages, debts, things like that. Comes up to the adjusted gross, and that's what they look at the estate tax exposure. Tom and Gail here, everything they own is $415,000. Will they pay estate taxes when they die? No, they're not even close to $22 million. All right, that $22 million, I can use it while I'm alive, or I can use it when I die, either one. But in addition to that 11 that I can give away, I can also give everybody I know $15,000 a year. I could walk down the street handing out $15,000 checks. My wife could walk right behind me handing out $15,000 checks. And that would not count against that $11 million lifetime limit. If I wrote my kid a check for $25,000, then technically 15 of it was free. The other 10,000 I really owe gift or estate taxes on. But would I pay them? No, I would just apply it to my lifetime limit. So, and I'd fill out a form for that. And when I die, the IRS would say, well, Dan can give away $11 million. Has he already used part of it? Well, yeah, he gave his son $10,000 too much, so now all he's got left is $10,000,009, whatever that number would be. So you can use this while you're alive or dead. And this limit's gone up dramatically too, but when that lifetime limit was only $600,000, a lot of people gave a few thousand away every year to try to stay under that limit. Now, if you are writing checks, let's say maybe your brother needs an operation and you're giving him $25,000, just be sure and write the check directly to the hospital. If your son needs $25,000 for college, then be sure you write the check to the college instead of your son. Y'all know the reason not to write the kid the check, right? The other reason? Okay, just wanted to make sure about that. Okay, so this 15,000, people use it now, but a lot of us just don't have estate tax problems. Okay, and you can give away more than 15, That just applies to your lifetime limit. Finding the right lawyer, then you could go to the Yellow Pages. I'm assuming Tallahassee still has Yellow Pages now, but you probably got 100 pages of lawyers. You go to the internet. I would start asking friends or family, say, I need a lawyer to do a will. Have you got one that did yours, reasonably priced, trustworthy? Most of your friends will say, I don't have a lawyer or will either one. But if you ask enough people, somebody will say, I use Susan right down here on the corner, known her forever, reasonably priced. We give you the Bar Association website. It looks like about 4 down there. And I wouldn't go there to find a lawyer, but after you find one, I'd go to that website just to make sure it looks like that they are in still good legal standing, and make sure that you can communicate with them well. I've got a handful of acquaintances that are real high powered lawyers, and I would never go to them for anything. We just kind of talk a different language. I just don't communicate real well with them. I would never use them. And be careful about the fees. Don't ever do business with lawyers, CPAs, people like that without knowing up front what it's going to cost. I think in most cases, lawyers will meet with you once to talk about your situation, and then you can say, what is this going to cost? A couple of years ago, a lady on the front row held up a couple of pieces of paper and said, I've got a copy of my lawyer's menu right here. And of course, I had to ask what she meant, but she met with a lawyer. They talked. She said, what's this going to cost? He handed her this thing in plastic that was just like a restaurant menu. And it had simple will so much, will with a trust so much, durable power. And she just said, give me one of those, and she called it her lawyer's menu. Not all of them will charge by the document. When I needed that trust done for my mama, I asked Perry what it's going to cost, and he said, well, I charge $3.50 an hour, and this will take between 3 and 4 hours. So a lot of them will give you estimates that way, but if you can't get at least some kind of estimate out of one of them, then just move on to the next one. It's not like they're hard to find. I mean, particularly here in Tallahassee, we probably throw a rock outside and hit 3 probably. Yeah, but look around for one. Now check to make sure you don't have some resources that might do wills for you. Check your EAP program. That a lot of cases an EAP program will give you a simple will for free. I heard not too long ago that don't hold me to this one either, but I was told by someone that usually knows that the group state life insurance provider you have might give you a simple will for free. But check those EAP programs. Let's see, if you're military, then or retired military, you might get some help with legal things. If your spouse is a union person, sometimes unions have lawyers on staff that will do simple wills. I go to a mega church. We've got lawyers on staff that will do a certain amount of things like that. Used to be in Rotary Club. We had Rotary lawyers, gave discounts. So if you look around, you might have some access to some lawyers on some kind of a reduced cost basis. What else about this? Anything here? I have actually lost track of the time, so I'm not sure when my hour and a half is up. Is there anybody that can tell me that? Technically, I was supposed to start at 10:15, and that would give me to 10:45. That'd give me to 11:45, but we started about 45 minutes earlier. How much time do I have left? Quite a bit. Okay. All right. I've got you forever. Y'all thought you were getting lunch early, didn't you? But no, they let me talk. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about insurance, but still back on the estate deal, folks. We're pushing you hard to get those wills done, and I know some of you just haven't gotten around to do it, or you don't know how to get started. Some people have. I run into people all the time that have just got family issues. I mean, life's kind of complicated now, isn't it? It used to be life was simple, right? I mean, it was a husband and wife and 2.2 kids, the station wagon, a dog and a half. Everybody lived in the same town. I mean, life used to be simple, but now my kids, her kids, our kids, and I got a problem with that one, and they're spread out around the country, and life's just simple now. But that makes it tough that if you pass away and you haven't done a lot of homework or hadn't taken care of some things aren't going to go the way that you want it done. So if you've got issues, some people say, no, I don't have issues. Well, if you don't think you got issues, that's your issue, okay? But, I mean, we've all got that weird cousin in the family or something, and so you got to go ahead and get these wills done. Please do those. Let's see. And the guidance line is a great resource for that. Call them and say, hey, I know I need to get a will done, but I got this one little issue here. You got any idea how I can solve this or what I need to kind of be thinking about? And when you're talking to our guidance line planners, they are there to give financial guidance. They don't give legal advice. Now, you might end up talking to one of the planners that might happen to be an attorney, but still not giving legal advice. So they're there to talk about all this stuff, but don't be surprised if you get to a certain complication level, that planner might say, hey, I know the answer to that, but you just kind of crossed over from financial guidance to legal advice, and we're not doing that. So they're there to help you up to a certain point. All right, let's talk a little bit about insurance, and these are different types of insurance, protect assets and income. Disability insurance, then you get that through your employer, and typically, even if you want to buy additional disability insurance, you may not be able to do that. You can typically only insure maybe 60 to 70% of your income. That if you can buy tons of disability insurance, then it makes it easier to sit on the couch at home rather than to come back to work. Then, let's see, property insurance. Make sure you take a look at this stuff every year or so, and the policies change, things like that. But your auto policy, then again, look at that every couple of years. Make sure it's updated. It's real easy when the rates get kind of high to let that liability coverage amount go real low. And homeowners insurance, be real careful about that too, particularly deductibles. It seems like I've run into people lately that are raising their deductibles real high because that brings your premiums down. But in my heart, I know these people don't have enough money to pay the deductible. And we just had a pretty big claim on my house, and I had kind of forgotten, but we got a $3,000 deductible, which is common for a homeowner's insurance policy. But I had just kind of forgotten. And when my insurance agent said that, I said, pardon? And then he kind of reminded me we had that conversation. But that's real common now, and it saved us a few bucks, but I hated to write that one big check there too. And of course, most of you are a whole lot more up on flood insurance and hurricane insurance than I would ever be. And that excess liability or umbrella coverage, I guess standard for almost everybody has been $1 million worth of that. But if you're going to get sued or have some kind of a big liability issue, I don't know if it's ever less than $1 million or something. And the stuff used to cost about $100 per million. I think it's a little higher than that now. But think about the kind of liabilities you have. When I mentioned if you got that 30-year-old son that's got some issues and your name's on his car, then just think about the excess problems that you might possibly have. Then all of you are up to speed on your medical insurance. If you are close to walking out the door, go ahead and find out from someone what your retiree medical insurance is going to cost. Most likely it's going to be a choker. Most places I go, husband and wife, close to $1,500 a month, an individual $700 to $800 a month. That is a big chunk out of a pension check. So make sure you find out as soon as you can, because so maybe you can start to budget for that. If you're 3 or 4 years from walking out, let HR off the break, or off the hook. Don't ask them what the retiree medical is going to cost in 5 years. They don't know. All they can tell you is what it is now, and then you can inflate that a little bit. tons and tons of people that I talk to assume they'll work to age 65 because that's when Medicare kicks in, just to avoid that retiree medical insurance premium. And I run to people all the time that say, no, Dan, for me, Medicare is 66. Well, folks, for most of you, you have three ages you care about. There's the age when you're eligible for normal retirement under the FRS. Medicare is 65, and then our full Social Security for probably most of us is going to be 66 or maybe 67. Now, it used to be, so for most people, full Social Security and Medicare are not going to be the same age. I mean, people older than I think of us, there was a class of people, full Social Security was 65, Medicare was 65, and they set it up that way. But then they said, well, let's make the young folks work longer before they get Social Security. So Social Security and Medicare are not the same thing. Medicare is 65. Then Part A, we don't pay for out of our checking account. That's coming out of tax money. Part B, there's a sliding scale on that. Could be as low. I think they announced the other day that next year, Part B, I think, is $144.50 a month and could go up into the 300s. And then Part C, that brings managed care to the Medicare facility. You may or may not retire in a place that has HMO type or PPO coverage for Medicare. And Part D is that drug coverage, Medigap policies. Then people with Medicare typically have another supplemental type of policy cover what Medicare does not cover. Long-term care policies. If you haven't started thinking about long-term care insurance, now would be a good time to do that. I've not bought a policy for my wife and I. We're trying to think through that now, though we've got a little group thing. I'm not sure it's worth very much, but I bought one of these long-term care policies for my mom. Had to be close to 30, maybe over 30 years ago now. That my dad's been gone forever. My mom had nothing, had no money at all, and I knew she was going to be my responsibility. I bought long-term care insurance, and I paid for this stuff, I think, for about 23 years, hating every premium. I cannot tell you how often I almost canceled that stuff. But then Mama ended up with Alzheimer's in a care facility, and this policy didn't pay all of it, but it paid a huge chunk of it. And in fact, buying that policy was probably the smartest financial decision that I have ever made. So it worked out great for me. But don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting you buy long-term care insurance. You've just got to address the issue. You've got to have the conversation with your spouse, your mom and daddy. Hey, if we have this Alzheimer's problem, dementia problem, how are we going to fund this? So you've got to address the issue. But who buys long-term care insurance? Wealthy people don't buy it. If you've got enough money to write $80,000 a year checks for a long time, you don't need the insurance. People without money don't buy it. They depend on welfare or Medicaid for long-term care. Problem is, you and I are kind of right in the middle. Maybe we're not wealthy, but hopefully we're not going to be on Medicaid or welfare. We're the kind of people that consider this long-term care insurance. But again, it worked out perfect for my mama, but it doesn't work out great for everybody. My cousin bought a policy on her mom, and her mom was well on Friday, dead on Monday. So it was a terrible buy for her. So don't walk out the door saying, Dan said I needed to buy this stuff. You just got to address the issue. If we have the problem, how are we going to do this? And stuff's not easy to buy. You have to be in good shape medically, and the policies are complicated. I mean, you can buy a policy that will take care of you if you almost have a hangnail, or you can buy a policy that will only start paying after 6 months and you're flat on your back, bedridden or something. I mean, all different levels and time frames, and it's expensive. If you do get some prices for one of these policies, be sitting down when you look at the prices the first time, because they can cost a bundle. But you've got to at least address the issue. And our guidance line planners don't sell this stuff. but you can kind of talk through the issue with them. But you got to start thinking about the long-term care. Then again, the costs are real high, and you buy policies that pay forever. I think the policy I bought for my mom, I think had a 5 year benefit. It was 5 years. There was some other little weird deal, so it turned out to be about 5.5 years. And she was in a care facility for 6 years. So that one wasn't perfect. I wanted, when I bought that policy, I, of course, like everybody else, said, well, what length of time you want the policy? Well, forever, whatever length of time mom was in there. But the 5 year premium was this, the lifetime premium was this. So I kind of went with what made sense at the time, kind of thing. So that's a big deal. And how quick the benefits begin. You buy a policy that'll start paying on mom in 30 days, or one that you pay for 6 months and then the policy kicks in. And inflationary increases that medical costs go up a lot every year. Some of those long-term care policies might pay $100 a day, and it might never go up. But then some of them will pay $100 a day or whatever, but they go up every year. And then what kind of care do they provide? Are they going to take care of mom and daddy at home, or does it have to be in a skilled nursing facility? There's a lot of problems with that. Now, a lot of people just kind of automatically say, well, the government will take care of that. Well, that falls under Medicaid or Medicaid or welfare. So don't automatically think the government's going to provide that. Medicare, that everybody's going to probably end up being, that doesn't take care of long-term care. Yes. Can you speak up a little? I'm sorry. Question is, what's a wild guess annual premium for this stuff? And I'm not going to throw a number out there. I mean, it can be just anything, but whatever you think might be affordable for you and reasonable, just kind of double that before you ever get thinking. I mean these prices, sir. Okay, that's a price. That's not the cost of insurance. Okay, that's just what he's paying for. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. When my mama died 2 years ago, the care place she was in, I think it was $8,000 a month, something like that. That's kind of average. That wasn't a Taj Mahal. That's just kind of an average number, but 8 to 10 a month, and those costs aren't going down at all. It's a big deal, and the insurance, you just may not be able to afford the insurance, but you've just got to have the conversation. You got to address the issue. If we have this problem, what are we going to do? Okay. Then life insurance is out there. Hopefully all of you know what your options are with your group life insurance. Uh, and technically a lot of people say, well, when I retire, I don't need life insurance, but it's according to actually what you bought the life insurance to start with. In a perfect world, you buy life insurance when you're a kid, you have huge family responsibilities, and you have no money, so you need a lot of life insurance. But then when you get to retirement, you're kind of saying, well, I have enough money and assets to take care of everybody I care about for the rest of my life. Then you might say, well, I don't need life insurance at that point. But you may just want it for another thing. Some people use life insurance to maybe let them take that option one instead of the option three benefit. They call that pension maximization. Some people say, well, I would like to leave a nice gift for my daughter and my son. Some people might say, well, I'll keep that life insurance and that'll be a nice gift for the church down the road, something like that. So some people think of life insurance as a temporary need. Some people want life insurance forever. They just want it for different purposes. And the guidance line doesn't sell insurance, but you can call them and say, can you help me figure out how much life insurance I need to take care of oh, uh, maybe college expenses for my three grandkids or something like that, so they can always run those kind of numbers for you. Then y'all have already talked about all the pension options. This is a great call for the guidance line. When you get those, the cost, not the cost, but the dollar value for all four options, call the guidance line. Say, these are very confusing. Help me understand these for my family, my finances, my life insurance, my life expectancy, then my wife's life expectancy. But help the planners or use the planners to talk you through this because these things are confusing. You might look at number one, say, "Ooh, I love the amount of number one, but I guess I got a spouse, so I guess I need to do three. Well, wait a minute, four starts above three. How does that work?" These things are going to be very confusing. Take advantage of the guidance line to help you with that. Make sure you've got your beneficiaries up to date, whether that be your 457 deferred comp or the FRS investment plan or whatever. And I know I've mentioned the investment plan a few times, but a lot of people that are in the pension and going into drop, you're thinking, okay, get that investment plan. But hopefully all of you know when you come out of drop, you can roll your drop money to your deferred comp, 403B IRA. You can actually roll your drop money into the FRS investment plan. And I know that sounds weird because you've been told you can't be in both plans. You can't change plans while you're in drop, but the FRS and the IRS will let you use the investment plan for your drop rollover. You're not changing plans. You're still getting your pension checks forever. You've just used the investment plan for your drop rollover. And a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are doing it just saying, well, I've been happy with the FRS for 30 or 40 years. Must be a good idea. Sure, I'll stick with them. But a lot of people are doing it because of low internal management charges. Every mutual fund in the world, whether it's in your deferred comp, investment plan, wherever, has those little hidden charges, money coming out of your money. The hidden charges on those FRS select funds are lower than you'll find in your deferred comp or IRA anywhere else. So a lot of people are using the investment plan for their drop rollover because of the low hidden charges. As we talk about this, I'm not trying to sell you on that, but when you get to that point, that's an option worth considering. But a great call for the guidance line, maybe 6 months before you finish drop, is what are my rollover options? Then what are the advantages to my deferred comp? Advantages to the investment plan? Advantages to an IRA? They can help you think through that. But that's an option. I run to people all the time that say, well, I'm going to roll half drop to my deferred comp. I'll roll half to the investment plan. And then down the road somewhere, I'll figure out which one of those two I like the best. Okay. But take advantage of that if it makes sense for you. Then y'all already talked about the survivor benefits, death benefits under the pension and the investment plan. I'm talking a little bit about Social Security this afternoon. I forget the time. It's on your schedule. It's either 3 or 3:30, something like that. And I'm kind of hitting the high spots of Social Security, but that's also a great call for the guidance line. That if you have detailed Social Security questions, pick up the phone and call the guidance line. Then almost all those planners are considered very well versed in Social Security. Then there's obviously different types of life insurance. You've got term insurance, whole life insurance, universal variable life insurance, and the guidance line planners understand the different types of insurance. And you can call them and say, I've got this insurance, but I don't exactly understand how it works. Then they can evaluate it and help you understand that. Or if you need life insurance, you might call in and say, hey, how much life insurance do I need? And they can run the numbers, and then you can say, well, what kind of insurance should I buy? And then they can help you understand term insurance, variable life. If you're buying life insurance and some insurance person has recommended maybe variable life or something like that, call the guidance line and say, hey, what do you know about this? What other questions should I ask? Are they good? Are they bad? But take advantage of those planners. So here's reasons we were here. My objective is really fairly simple, is I'm just trying to motivate you to take a little bit of action to improve your financial situation. Don't forget to do that survey for us. We would sincerely appreciate that. And we used to do paper surveys, and we did paper surveys. We got lots of them back because everybody would answer a few questions and then leave them. So we got lots of feedback. But now with this electronic survey, I'll let you get out the door and you don't do the survey. So please do that for us. And I'm going to ask you again this afternoon to do a survey for the afternoon workshop. So I'm covering you up on surveys, but it is important. The FRS is concerned about the job we do, and they want your feedback. Then don't forget the tools and resources, myfrs.com. You'll need your PIN number. If you've lost yours, then just call that guidance line number. But those guidance line planners we mentioned earlier, it's telephone access. They love making telephone appointments. If you want to, you can just call in, hit 1 or 2, say, give me to a planner, and start talking. Or you can call in and say, I want a planner to call me next Tuesday afternoon, 5 o'clock, my home number, so my spouse and I can talk about this, 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 and this. On that text number for the survey, you can text in questions. They'll reply by text. Or you can text in, have a planner call me this Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, my office number. On the website, if you go out there just to wander around this afternoon, won't be out there a moment or two, you'll get a pop-up box. Hey, anything I can help you with? You can have an hour-long financial planning conversation chatting online if you want to. That sounds a little alien to me, but I think there's an age break there that I have broken. But you want an hour-long chat online, they'll do that. Or you can say, will you have a planner call me next Wednesday at my home number? So take advantage of the planners. Be on the lookout for other workshops. I'm sure all of you are at some agencies where we get from time to time, but you can see the schedule on the website. And then this afternoon, we're doing the basics of Social Security, things on your action plan, get a will, get a PIN number, run a retirement plan, do the survey, again, get a will. Oh, do that vital records organizer. That's a real easy thing that you can do, but if you find one of those that you can print off, then you can go ahead and start working on that. And if you do that vital records organizer, when you go to the lawyer to get your will done, you take that thing with you, then it's got everything. You can talk about, well, hey, I got this little piece of property, or my beneficiary's right, but you'll have everything there with you to get those wills done. What else? Y'all have asked some good questions as we've gone through. Anything left over? Yes. Question is, do you have two wills? And I think years ago, I think it was common to have one will for a husband and wife, but I think now they do wills separately. So you're going to have one for you and one for the spouse. Yes. What else? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. When do they come back? Does everybody know? Okay, 1 o'clock for the next thing. I enjoyed being with you. I'll be around a few more minutes. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you down the road.